Oh, thank you all for tuning to another edition of Outside the Shop with me, your host, Daryl D. Lane, where I get to discuss everything that I normally don't get to talk about on my regular sports podcast, Barbershop Sports Talk, which airs on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, all your podcasting apps and platforms. I am going to release a podcast tonight. I'll also post it up on Facebook tomorrow, but it will be released tonight. Gonna have Ben Karen on, host of Sports Barber Podcast, and we are going to dive into the last predictions, really, of at least of the regular season for the NFL, as Week 17 has come. It's so sad, and we're gonna dive into some college football. I know Ben's gonna have some opinions on that. Clemson versus Ohio State. Alabama versus Notre Dame. Also probably going to talk a little bit about his Aggies missing the playoffs. So definitely stay tuned to that. Now, first, I do want to say this. Happy New Year's Eve to everybody. Hope everybody's going to be safe, spend some time with their families, not do anything too crazy. I hope that doesn't happen. But nonetheless, let's get down to what we have today. So Florida quarterback Kyle Trask declares for the NFL draft. Now, Florida got decimated by Oklahoma. Yesterday, they got decimated by Oklahoma. He had 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He was a Heisman hopeful, a Heisman candidate. He's a Heisman finalist. Some people talked about Kyle Trask potentially being the Joe Burrow of this year, potentially maybe moving up into the high first round. I'm not seeing it. I'm going to have to watch a little bit more of Kyle Trask before I can make a super educated opinion on it. But right now, I think he's more of a second, third round quarterback. He's closer to being an A.J. McCarron, per se, than a Joe Burrow, I think. But there's nothing wrong with that. Great college quarterback, but don't know if I necessarily love his prospects in the NFL. Now, next up, the Buffalo Bills. This is an important day in Buffalo Bills history. You might say, like, how? Well, a couple of years ago today, you want to know what happened? The Cincinnati Bengals beat the Baltimore Ravens. And what's so important about this is it allowed for Buffalo to have its first ever playoff berth in about 20 years, about 2 decades almost. About a decade and 7 years, I think. A decade and 8 years, something close to that. But that's what we got. And I think Bills fans gave Andy Dalton a bunch of gifts and donated a lot of money to his charity because the Bengals upset the Ravens that year. So definitely let's remember that. If you're a Bills fan, be thankful, because since Sean McDermott and Josh Allen have been in play, we have been really, really good, and that's great to see. Now, next up, we have the Phillip Rivers and the Indianapolis Colts. So Phillip Rivers was talking about possibly retiring this week, and I think it's really interesting as the Colts pissed away their game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We could see the Colts out the playoffs, and if that's the case, Phillip Rivers is kind of undecided if he play in the NFL again. And he's old. I don't think Phillip Rivers is that good, personally. People want to criticize Ben Roethlisberger, how he's been playing. I don't think Phillip Rivers has been all that great this whole year. 23 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. It's meh. They have to put in Jacoby Brissett because Jacoby Brissett has more arm strength at points of the game just so he can get the ball down the field, which I think that tells you all you need to know about how Frank Wright and the Indianapolis Colts brass thinks of Phillip Rivers. But nonetheless, this is the last game Phillip Rivers ever plays. It has been a great career, though not a Hall of Fame career. Now we have the Miami Dolphins. Quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick tests positive for COVID-19 is out versus the Buffalo Bills. This is great. I think he's probably the better quarterback right now out of him and Tua. He's had to come in and save the day for Tua a couple times, particularly against their game against the Las Vegas Raiders a couple of weeks ago. So without that second pitcher per se that the Dolphins can just go into, right? That they can just go in the bottom of the ninth, in the fourth quarter, and be like, hey, take us home, Ryan. Take us home. They won't have that, so I think it's going to be very interesting. Even though the Bills might not be trying their hardest, you definitely, for the Dolphins, you want your best players out, and that will hurt them. And we have the NFLPA president, J.C. Trader, says he's seeking the end of mini camps and OTAs because he says we didn't need them this year because of COVID, right? So why do we need them at all? I think that you do need OTAs, you do need mini camps, and the reason is I think it's always good to have practice. I don't believe in this this idea that these players, that they shouldn't have OTAs, that they shouldn't have mini camps. I think there's ways to make the game safer. I think there's ways to make practice easier. But there's nothing that substitutes for that time, like practice. Like if you play sports at any level, you realize like you need practice. That's how you get better. That's how you sharpen your craft. You get in the room. You get in the organization. You know, iron sharpens iron. You get maybe a little bit more different of competitiveness, different feel than when you train on your own. So I definitely would disagree with that. I think there's ways to make it easier and lighter on the players, but I still think it's important nonetheless. And if I'm a coach, I want practice. I want to be there. If I'm a coach, that's what you want. So I don't think that's going to happen, but very interesting. And Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer signs a legislation allowing for the potential ability for college athletes in the state of Michigan to get paid for their likeness. I think this is a long time coming. I understand people who are not for the pay for play for athletes, but here's what I'm saying. If, at the very minimum, if you don't believe that players should get a salary, they should be able to make money off their likeness, right? If they want to sign autographs for $100 at a line or whatever at some school and do it, let them do it. I think this is simple. I think it's easy. It allows the players that really should be getting paid to get paid. Now we have this to the NBA. 0 COVID-19 positives out of 495 players since December 24th. Hey, big news. The NBA, they've kind of probably say they've been ahead of a curve in terms of what they're doing with COVID. So it's really nice to see that working out. Obviously, some guys like James Harden put them in danger. Then they just nix them like, you're not playing. But the NBA is definitely doing a good job with COVID-19. And they're going to need to do a good job. And these teams are going to need to do a good job if they want to keep their season going. And lastly, the San Antonio Spurs make history. Greg Popovich, head coach of the San Antonio Spurs, gets ejected. But you know why this is history? Not because Greg Popovich got ejected, right? I mean, that means he's made history for half the games he coaches. But Becky Hammon was able to be the coach in his stead. And this marks the first time there is a woman head coach, a woman coaching, leading the team in the NBA. So that's some really good news there and some special stuff. So congrats to Becky Hammon for making history. And that's all we have for this edition of Outside the Shop. If you guys want to check out the podcast that I'm releasing with Ben Karen, we're going to preview NFL, college football, then you can check it out on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all your podcasting apps and platforms. So definitely do that. Again, I want to wish a happy new year to everybody. Stay safe. It's been a tough year for a lot of people, but I always believe everything happens for a reason. So let's make the most of this and let's make 2021 much, much better than 2020. Have a great day and God bless.